Hi guys, today's movie is The Saint, which stars Val Kilmer as a master thief and sort of man of a thousand faces, a brilliant master of disguise, and this is actually based on an earlier work which I don't know much about, so I have no way of comparing the two, so I'll just kind of stick with my experience just with The Saint. And this is one that I was pretty interested in watching. It has very mediocre reviews overall that I've looked up. When I first got this disc, I looked through all the movies that I had not seen before and just kind of got a general sense of maybe where on a list it should be, what I should get to based on some reviews. And this was kind of towards the back of my list because the reviews for it were overall pretty middle of the road, somewhat more negative on the critic side and the audience score. But I've seen it mentioned a bunch of times in the LaserDisc Forever group. People seem to really enjoy it, so it kind of, alright, maybe I'll check it out a little bit sooner than I originally planned. And then I noticed Elizabeth Shue's name on the cover, and of course then it brought it up towards the top of my list, and definitely gonna check it out. Don't fuck with the babysitter. So I'll definitely, that helped me reach this movie sooner as far as the movies I haven't seen in my collection. But it stars Val Kilmer as Simon Templar, who I already discussed sort of the basis of that character, and so much of this movie relies on his character and Elizabeth Shue's character, and if either one of those characters didn't work, I feel like this movie as a whole wouldn't work, because aside from those characters, it feels very much like a generic action movie, and that's not necessarily a negative. Overall, it involves the rise of a very ambitious politician, Russian billionaire who's truly trying to take over the Russian government. He is, at this time, Russia is going through a massive heating crisis. There's no heating oil available. They're having trouble keeping the people warm in their homes during a very harsh winter, and he's actually hiding the oil and trying to come up with different ways to overthrow the presidency and rebuild Russia and the Russian Empire in his own image. And it eventually starts to involve this idea of a cold fusion process that is supposed to provide near limitless energy that was created by the Oxford scientist who was played by Elizabeth Shue. And it starts revolving around the Val Kilmer's character, Simon Templar, being at first employed to try and catch this formula, figure this out, and he ends up falling in love with her though, and that of course complicates things, and to that point, it's a very standard film. You kind of know already, going into it, what's going to happen. You know he's going to fall for her. You know it's going to put him at odds with the people he was originally employed for. And you can kind of see every little twist and turn as it comes throughout the movie. And it continues that way even through its finale, which I won't spoil, but it'll be spoiled for you halfway through the movie. You'll understand the pattern that this movie is taking and where it's eventually going to go. But even in saying that, even though the overall screenplay and the overall story of this film seems very cliched and simple, and overall it's not really going to provide any real amazement. It's not something that's really the strong point of this movie. It really, where it shines is in the characters that it creates. Even as far as the score and as far as the way it's directed visually, it's on that same level where it looks good, but there's nothing truly outstanding on either front. There's nothing that's really going to stick with you. For me, it wasn't very memorable. Like, I probably, a couple weeks from now won't really be able to remember much of the score of this film. There weren't really any specific shots or moments that really stood out visually, whereas I liked more of the characters that were created in this film. It does start off giving you a little bit of backstory, in a very positive way. It's done where you get just enough backstory to add to the character that Val Kilmer plays, but it doesn't go on too long. It just gives you enough to understand the motivations of the character, and I thought that was done very well. It wasn't too underplayed, it wasn't too overblown, and it affected the character, and you see the repercussions of that childhood in how it created the man who he became, but it wasn't something that it wasn't constantly prevalent throughout the whole movie, and sometimes movies will do that, or people from his childhood will come back into his life, and sometimes it's overdone. Here it wasn't. Just kind of set the character is put out there, and Val Kilmer overall did a good job with this character, but to me, again, it wasn't incredibly memorable. I liked the character, but sometimes he played a bunch of different disguises and different accents, and they were kind of hit or miss for me in many ways. The overall performance and the overall presentation of the character I really, really enjoyed. There were just moments or certain elements that didn't quite work as well for me as others, but again, it's just sort of, it falls into the same thing with the overall plot, where it's good for what it is, but it's nothing absolutely incredible. Even another character that's played very well is this main villain. I really like him and his son. They, again, are in that same realm where there's enough personality to them, and the actors do enough of a good job that it keeps you invested in a film that otherwise might have been mediocre overall. It's one of those films that the overall product is heightened by some of the individual performances in this movie. That also goes along lines with Elizabeth Shue, who I really believed her character and understood her character, and really I enjoyed her. And Elizabeth Shue is one of those people where I'm always willing to check out her stuff, but she's a bit hit or miss for me. Sometimes I really like her in a movie, sometimes I just don't think the character works for me. And here's one where it really, really did. I really enjoyed her character, and I enjoyed Val Kilmer's character separately in their own rights. I really enjoyed those characters. The part that didn't quite work for me was their romance. I just didn't quite feel the chemistry between those characters. It just didn't feel believable to me, and that's the job of a movie, really, is that suspension of disbelief. It doesn't matter if the movie is incredibly realistic, it doesn't matter if it has absurd action that it can no way exist in real life, it doesn't matter either extreme. What matters is, can a movie make you believe that within the context of this film's reality, that is reality? Like, you don't think about the outside logical reasoning, you think about within this film. And that aspect to me didn't quite reach that point. I didn't feel genuine sexual tension. I didn't feel a genuine relationship forming between those two characters. And I don't think, again, that it was really the fault of either actor, because I think that they both, again, did good jobs. I think they really did a fantastic job with their characters, but I just didn't quite feel that relationship didn't draw me in. The romantic element of the plot didn't draw me in the way that I was kind of hoping that it would. And that is leads to the action, really, because then after that you have the suspense and the thriller aspects, which are good, but so predictable and so just sort of standard and status quo that it's done well, but it's nothing too exciting. You have the romance, which, again, I enjoy both the characters that are involved, but I didn't quite buy the romance. So it really leaves the action elements of this film, and they kind of fall into the same category where enjoyable, but nothing that's really going to stand out in my mind, nothing that I'm really going to think of when I look back on this movie. I'm going to have to really just sort of like scratch my brain trying to remember certain action scenes, because there was nothing extraordinary, and that's kind of what I took away from this film, and it leaves me somewhat disappointed, because I see this so highly recommended amongst a lot of LaserDisc collectors. But I also don't quite agree with the critics, who tend to give it lukewarm to a negative feedback. And I think that my review would be a little bit more in the middle. I didn't think it was a remarkable movie in any aspect, really, but there's nothing I can point to that was truly awful. I don't think a single character was bad, or portrayed poorly by the actor. I don't think there was any unnecessary characters. I think the editing was pretty tight. There was nothing in here that I felt was extraneous. There was nothing really extra, nothing I would take out. Everything at least added to what was happening, even if it really wasn't anything too incredible. I do think that it's a competently created picture, and is one that is enjoyable enough that I will definitely watch it again. I know I will. It was overall a fun, enjoyable experience, and that's kind of, what's the most important element with a movie like this? Something that's not going to be groundbreaking, something that's not going to be extraordinarily exceptional. Was it just entertaining? And yes, this was entertaining. And again, I did like Val Kilmer and Elizabeth Shue in here. I think that they pretty much saved the movie from mediocrity just through their performances, and this is a very good release here. Widescreen edition, THX, Dolby Digital, surround, and on top of that too, you also have a commentary track from the director, and that's always a nice thing to have, especially on just a basic release, something that's not a big collector's edition like box set or anything like that. Just that's such a cool extra to have, particularly for the time. So I love hearing director's commentary. So it is a great disc. It looks and sounds great. It's a later release. I wouldn't consider it a late release, but it's a later release, 97. And again, you have the director's commentary track. So overall, it's a really good release of a pretty good movie. And I think that if I hadn't seen the hype from other Laserdisc collectors and things, I probably would have gone into this with lower expectations, just knowing that it had terrible critical scores, and I probably would have liked it a little bit more, but I think I kind of hyped myself up to this being a little more of a hidden gem I was expecting. I was expecting one of those movies where the critics got it wrong. This is amazing. Kind of in the middle overall, so a good release of a pretty good movie.